The mannequin aisle. The rain pelted the pavement outside as I pushed my shopping cart through the automatic doors of Lambert's supermarket. The flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows on the rows of neatly stacked shelves. It was late, and the store was empty except for the occasional distant shuffle of a weary stock clerk. As I made my way through the aisles, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The mannequins scattered throughout the store seemed to follow me with their lifeless eyes. I brushed it off as paranoia, attributing it to the late hour and the stormy weather. But then I noticed something strange. One of the mannequins, positioned at the end of the canned goods aisle, had shifted slightly. Its hand, which had previously been at its side, was now raised in a beckoning gesture. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Must be imagining things, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease creeping over me. But when I glanced away and then back again, the mannequin's hand was still raised, as if it was reaching out to me. I hurried past, my footsteps echoing off the linoleum floor. But the feeling of being watched only intensified as I made my way deeper into the store. The mannequins seemed to multiply, their blank faces staring down at me from every corner. I quickened my pace, desperate to get out of there. But as I rounded the corner into the frozen foods section, I stumbled to a halt. The aisle was filled with mannequins, their arms outstretched, blocking my path. I backed away slowly, my heart racing. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty store, coming closer and closer. But when I turned to look, there was no one there. Panic rising in my chest, I turned back to the mannequins, only to find them advancing toward me, their plastic faces twisted into sinister smiles. And as I stood there, frozen in terror, I realized that I was not alone in Lambert's supermarket. And whatever was lurking in the shadows was not of this world. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest as the mannequins advanced, their plastic limbs moving with an unnatural fluidity. I needed to find a way out, but every aisle seemed to be filled with more of them, blocking my escape. Frantically, I searched for a way out, but the aisles stretched on endlessly, a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. The rain outside hammered against the windows, the sound blending with the eerie silence of the store. Then, through the fog of fear, a memory surfaced, a story I had heard as a child about Lambert's supermarket. Legend had it that the store was built on the site of an old cemetery, and that the restless spirits of the dead still roamed the aisles at night. I had always dismissed it as nothing more than a spooky tale to scare children, but now, faced with the reality of the mannequins closing in around me, I couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to it. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that I was not dealing with ordinary mannequins, they were something far more sinister. The thought sent a shiver down my spine as I remembered the raised hand, the beckoning gesture that had set off this nightmare. But why were they after me? What did they want? As I struggled to make sense of the chaos unfolding around me, a voice echoed through the darkness, a low, guttural sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, sending chills down my spine. I turned, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one there. Only the mannequins, closing in on me with every passing second. And then, as if in response to my unspoken question, the voice spoke again, filling the air with its icy presence. "We were here first," it hissed, sending a wave of terror crashing over me. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and ran, pushing past the advancing mannequins, their plastic hands reaching out to grab me. I could feel their cold fingers brushing against my skin as I sprinted down the aisle, desperate to escape the nightmare that had consumed Lambert's supermarket. But no matter how fast I ran, the aisles seemed to stretch on endlessly, a maze of shadows and whispers closing in around me. And as I stumbled through the darkness, I knew that I was not alone, that something ancient and malevolent lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim me as its own. But I refused to give in to the terror that threatened to consume me. I needed to find a way out, to unravel the mystery of what was happening in this cursed place. As I raced through the aisles, I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye, a glimmer of light at the far end of the store. With renewed determination, I pushed forward, dodging past the advancing mannequins, their hands reaching out to grab me. Finally, I burst through the doors at the end of the aisle and stumbled out into the rain-soaked parking lot. The storm had intensified, the wind whipping through the empty cars, the rain lashing against my skin. But I didn't stop to catch my breath. I needed to find answers, to uncover the truth behind the haunting of Lambert's supermarket. With a sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I made my way to the town library, hoping to find some clue, some shred of information that could help me make sense of what I had witnessed. As I pored over dusty old books and faded newspaper clippings, a picture began to emerge, a tale of greed and betrayal, of a cemetery desecrated to make way for progress, of restless spirits seeking revenge on those who had wronged them. And at the center of it all was Lambert's supermarket, built on the site of the old cemetery, its foundations resting on the graves of the dead. With my newly gained knowledge, I knew that I couldn't stay. The horrors that lurked within those haunted aisles were too much for one person to bear. With a heavy heart and a sense of defeat weighing me down, I turned and fled into the night, leaving behind the cursed store and the nightmares that had consumed me. But even as I drove away, the memory of Lambert's supermarket lingered, haunting me like a specter in the darkness. I knew that I would never be able to escape the horrors that I had witnessed, the voices that whispered in the shadows, the eyes that watched me from every corner. And so, with a sense of resignation settling over me like a shroud, I made my way to the nearest mental institution, seeking solace in the safety of its walls. As I checked myself in, the weight of the past hung heavy on my shoulders, the memories of Lambert's supermarket like a nightmare that refused to end. But as I settled into my new surroundings, surrounded by the quiet hum of the institution and the gentle reassurance of the staff, I knew that I had finally found a semblance of peace. And though the horrors of Lambert's supermarket would continue to haunt my dreams, I took comfort in the knowledge that I was safe at last, far away from the malevolent presence that lurked within its walls. Story 2. The Heirloom Mirror. The old house had always been filled with whispers of the past, secrets lurking in every shadow. But it wasn't until my grandmother's death that I discovered the true extent of the darkness that lay within its walls. As I sorted through her belongings, preparing to sell the house and move on with my life, I stumbled upon an old mirror tucked away in the attic, a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation. Its ornate frame was tarnished with age, and its surface was clouded with dust. But as I wiped away the grime and gazed into its depths, I felt a chill run down my spine. The reflection staring back at me was not my own. Instead, it was twisted and distorted, a grotesque caricature of myself. And as I watched in horror, the image shifted and changed, morphing into something altogether more sinister. I tore my gaze away from the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was not right about it, something dark and malevolent that seemed to seep from its very core. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that settled over me, attributing it to the stress of my grandmother's passing. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the sense of foreboding that clung to the mirror like a shroud. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard whispers echoing through the darkness, the sound of voices from another time and place. And when I glanced toward the mirror that stood in the corner of the room, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadowy figure lurking just beyond the glass. With a shiver of fear, I turned away, pulling the covers tight around me as I tried to shut out the darkness that threatened to consume me. But as I drifted off to sleep, haunted by nightmares of twisted reflections and whispered secrets, I knew that the mirror was not just a harmless heirloom, it was something far more sinister, something that would change my life forever. The days passed in a blur as I tried to push the memory of the possessed mirror from my mind, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape its haunting presence. Every time I passed by the mirror, I felt its gaze upon me, as if it were watching and waiting for something. And whenever I dared to look into its depths, I saw the same twisted reflection staring back at me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within. But it wasn't just the mirror that unsettled me, it was the whispers that seemed to follow me wherever I went, the sense of being watched even when I was alone. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that the stress of my grandmother's death was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that there was something more to the mirror, something ancient and malevolent that defied explanation. Desperate for answers, I turned to the one person who might be able to shed light on the mystery, my grandmother's oldest friend, Mrs. Hawthorne. As I sat across from her in the dimly lit parlor of her old Victorian home, I recounted the strange events that had unfolded since I had inherited the mirror. To my surprise, Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes widened with recognition, and she reached out to grasp my hand in a vice-like grip. "The mirror," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "It's been cursed for generations, a vessel for dark forces beyond our comprehension." I listened in stunned silence as she recounted the story of how the mirror had come into my family's possession, passed down from ancestor to ancestor, leaving a trail of tragedy and despair in its wake. "It must be destroyed," Mrs. Hawthorne said, her voice trembling with fear, "before it claims another victim." But even as she spoke the words, I knew that it wouldn't be that simple. The mirror had a hold on me, a connection that went beyond mere superstition. And no matter how hard I tried to resist its pull, I knew that I would never be free of its influence. As I left Mrs. Hawthorne's house that night, the weight of her words hung heavy on my shoulders. The mirror was a curse, a blight upon my family's legacy, and I was the only one who could stop it. But as I made my way back to the old house, the darkness seemed to press in around me, whispering secrets and half-truths that shook me to the core. And as I stood before the mirror once more, its surface gleaming in the dim light, I knew that the true horror was yet to come. The night was thick with shadows as I stood before the cursed mirror, its surface gleaming in the dim light of the old house. I knew that I couldn't escape its influence, couldn't deny the darkness that lurked within. With a sense of grim determination, I reached out and grasped the mirror's ornate frame, feeling its icy touch send a shiver down my spine. The whispers grew louder, the voices of the past echoing in my ears as I prepared to confront the malevolent force that had plagued my family for generations. But as I stared into the mirror's depths, I saw something that scared me to the bone, a figure lurking just beyond the glass, its twisted reflection staring back at me with eyes filled with malice. With a surge of adrenaline, I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the final showdown, the moment of truth that would determine the fate of my family and the cursed mirror that had brought us so much pain. With a deep breath, I reached out and grabbed hold of the mirror, feeling its power surge through me like a bolt of lightning. The room seemed to spin around me, the walls melting away to reveal a world of darkness and despair. But even as I faced the darkness head-on, I knew that I was not alone. Somewhere deep within me, I found the strength to resist, to fight back against the forces that sought to consume me. With a cry of defiance, I smashed the mirror to pieces, watching as its shattered fragments fell to the floor in a cascade of sparks and shadows. And as the darkness receded, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a weight lifted from my shoulders. But suddenly, as the shards settled on the floor, I heard a sinister laughter echoing through the room. My heart froze in terror as I realized the mirror had not been destroyed. In horror, I watched as the shattered fragments began to reform, the broken pieces merging together to recreate the cursed mirror in its entirety. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling with fear and disbelief. The mirror had survived, its malevolent power stronger than ever. And as its surface rippled with dark energy, I knew that I had made a grave mistake. With a sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I turned and fled from the room, the echoes of sinister laughter following me down the darkened hallway. As I stumbled out into the night, the stars shining overhead like mocking sentinels, I knew that the battle was far from over. The mirror had survived, its dark influence spreading like a cancer, consuming everything in its path. And as I wandered the town streets, a sense of despair washed over me, knowing that I had unleashed a horror beyond imagination, a horror that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The end. Subscribe for more. Thank you.